Hello and welcome to Health and Care. I'm Adam Fields. I'm a chiropractor. There's something I do in my office. It's called extracorporeal shockwave therapy, where I send sound waves into the body and I break up scar tissue. And the result is something called fibrin and something called calcium, right? And I was noticing if I do a lot on people, they get fatigued. So I was talking to a colleague and we thought, okay, how about we give some enzymes on an empty stomach to go in the body and start digesting some of this extra fibrin. And so I have some, and it worked. People were getting fatigued and boom, they're no longer fatigued. It's amazing. So I reached out to Mike Kramarczyk, who is an expert in enzymes. He's worked with enzymologists. He's worked with researchers, with people who do formulations for the last 20 years. This is all he's focused on is enzymes. And so I want to introduce, and I'm proud to have him. And thank you so much for coming on the show, Mike. I appreciate it.
Totally my pleasure.
Right on. So most of us have heard of digestive enzymes that basically macerate our food and things like that. We have salivary amylase in our mouth and we have different things in our stomach. But what you've been really focused on is more systemic enzymes. Can you tell us sort of the difference?
Yeah, certainly. So digestive enzymes, they are taken with food. They release in the stomach, and they basically give the entire digestive process a head start. When you're talking about systemic enzymes, you're taking those away from food.
Mm-hmm.
They are protected in some manner. A lot of products are going to use some type of an enteric coating of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Some products are going to rely solely on the capsule to protect it, or will have a special kind of capsule that protects it. And they're going to pass through the empty stomach. They're going to release in the small intestine, get absorbed through those intestinal walls, get into your blood, and that's when they're going to bring with them an entirely different set of benefits. Some of the bigger success stories with systemic enzymes are going to relate to chronic pain, inflammation, arthritis, scar tissue, fibromyalgia.
Amazing.
A lot of women use them for uterine fibroids, fibrocystic breasts. Endometriosis is a big one. And then as far as a lot of cardio benefits, and that's going to actually touch in part on, you were mentioning fibrin earlier, and breaking up excess fibrin in the blood, that protein film that forms in the blood that gets your blood cells all clumped up and stuck together, that's going to get broken down, and quite rapidly at that.
Let me backtrack for 1 second. So just because a lot of people don't know, we have because we talked about them as far as a supplement goes. We actually have our own digestive enzymes. We have our own even systemic enzymes, right?
Yes, we do.
And you know, they often do a decent job, but sometimes they don't, right? So sometimes our digestion, because I know I used to take digestive enzymes before, and occasionally, and it would just help my food, right? Maybe less gas, something like that. If I had like a couple bowls of chili or something like that, and it would just like, okay, am I going to be good? Oh, okay, I'm good. I don't have the gas, and that helped me in the past. And we actually have systemic enzymes, and the definition of enzyme is basically like something that just breaks something down. Would you say?
They break something down, but they are also biocatalysts. And there's 8,300. Right around 8,300 different chemical reactions in the body that enzymes are directly responsible for, and would not happen without that certain enzyme as a mechanism.
We need enzymes.
But there's enzymes that break down fats, and enzymes for starches, and enzymes for carbs and proteins, and so on. But there are also some that really don't break down something, or their purpose isn't just to break down something, there to cause a reaction or cause the occurrence of something else to happen.
Helping one thing move into another,
yes.
Catalyzing a reaction, something like that.
Exactly.
Great. So, so I had this experience, right, where you talked about fibrin. So the fibrin actually it's almost like, it seems like it's almost like Pac-Man just coming in and eating up that fibrin. For instance, I had
exactly right.
That's it. That's what happens. Okay, it's like I had a woman that was. She was coming from LA. She had endometriosis, and she had an endometriosis surgery. After that, she got scar tissue. And so 6 months later, she had another surgery to remove the scar tissue. And then 6 months later, another one to remove the scar tissue. And this woman literally Mike, she had 30 surgeries. And so,
That sounds just like my mother, actually.
oh my gosh. So she calls me on the phone and she does a little fundraiser at her church to come, see Dr. Fields up in Northern California. And she gets a place to stay and everything. And I'm doing 4 times what I usually do, right? And she's still, which is a lot, right? And so I used a ton of these enzymes, fibrinolytic enzymes, and she would still go back to her hotel room and pass out, but she could handle it, right? And it's been like 4 years, and she has zero pain and never another surgery. She went from, gosh, we figured like $10 million in surgeries to this little chiropractor, and so it was kind of amazing. But anyway, so I used them on that level. And I know that there's some enzymes that can be taken orally that break down certain things. Like, what type of enzymes might I take for fibrin?
That's going to be like like I touched on earlier with the digestive enzyme blend. You're looking at enzymes for fats and starches and carbs and sugars and proteins. But when you look at the enzymes that are involved in a real comprehensive systemic enzyme blend, they are going to be primarily proteolytic or protein eating enzymes. And that's where, like, fibrinolytic enzymes, proteolytic enzymes, protein lysing enzymes, those are all the same type of enzyme. Those are going to be your protease, your bromelain, and the more common ones. And then the higher end ones are going to be like serrapeptase, ceaprose, trypsin,
Lumbrokinase.
Yeah.
Right. Nattokinase, that type of thing. So
absolutely.
Why is it, okay, all these people, we're sitting there watching us, we're listening to this enzyme expert, right? We're listening to you. What junk do I have in my blood that I really want to clean out?
The biggest ones are going to be, and it's well over 80% of the 80% of the people you walk past on the street are going to have 2 things in excess in their blood, especially if they're over the age of 30 years old. And that's going to be excess fibrin and that protein film that gets your blood cells kind of clumped up and stuck together. The Rouleau effect is actually what it's called, but it is a protein film that makes your blood cells kind of sticky, and that's what causes them to bind together and just they end up stacking up upon each other.
Oh, interesting. So we have things that are protein films that help, that make cells stick together, and then you've got the fibrin. So it's basically clots.
The fibrin kind of has an appearance, like if you're looking at it like under a dark field microscope, it's going to have the appearance of like almost like a white spider web going through your blood.
Oh, you definitely don't.
It's like a series of webs and nets going through your blood and just spinning around, sticking around, and we have a lot of people, many people, most people have too much of it.
So anybody over the age of 30 or something like that is going to have this stuff in their blood.
Well, the reason 30, it's not just a random number. We are born with this massive supply of enzymes already within us, and through our entire childhood, our body is not shy about tapping into that supply, and it uses those enzymes by the truckload. And that's why when we're 5 and 10 and 15 years old, we'd be running around, we would trip, fall, hurt ourselves, and probably get right back up and keep doing whatever it was that hurt us in the first place. But you'll notice when we're 40 or 50 or 60 years old, just isn't quite that same way. And the entire difference is enzymes. Because when we get older, especially when we start getting into the 28, 29, 30 years old, that's when a lot of big changes take place in the body. Our bodies, our aging process kicks into high gear, certainly at that point. But our body also takes inventory. And our body says, hey, if we keep using all these enzymes that we have at the rate that we did through our youth, we're not going to have any left when we get to 40 or 50 or 60. So instead of using the enzymes by the truckload, it starts to use them by the spoonful. And that's why when we get older, pain is more debilitating, recovery times are longer, scars are more visible. It's all because of enzymes. So when you supplement with a systemic enzyme, you're putting that huge supply back in play again. And our bodies quickly adapt to that. And they say, hey, wow, not only look at all these enzymes that we've got right now, but there's more where that came from. And so your body starts to feel more free to use them again in a similar manner to the way it did when we were younger.
Interesting. So you're actually stimulating the body to use its own enzymes also.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
and conserving the supply that you have, because you're putting so much in there that your body will use those first.
Right, right. What about like I know with leaky gut, right? We can end up with even undigested food particles. That
Parasites, all kinds of things. Yes.
oh wow, interesting. So I think the first time I heard about enzymes was the nattokinase, which comes from fermented soy,
Mm-hmm.
and it was for uterine fibroids.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something? I mean, that's real.
Fibroids is a real. I mean, if it's not in our top three, it's easily in our top five success stories as far as systemic enzymes go.
Mm.
Nattokinase actually is more commonly used nowadays
Mm-hmm.
for cardiovascular matters.
Mm.
Um, it's a very cardio focused enzyme. But one thing that's really awesome about nattokinase is it's very synergistic. Enzymes tend to play well with each other anyway,
Mm-hmm.
but nattokinase would be kind of up near the top of that list as far as playing well with others, because it doesn't just do what it does on its own by itself. It does, and it does that very well, especially in a cardiovascular arena.
Right.
But it also kind of acts like a steering wheel. And so if you're incorporating it with other enzymes like a serrapeptase or like a trypsin or chymotrypsin or just a plain protease,
Mm-hmm.
um, the nattokinase actually kind of guides some of the focus of all the other enzymes around it to also work on the cardio and focus on the cardio. And other enzymes like serrapeptase, for example, will probably be better for breaking down like scar tissue in the case of endometriosis or a uterine fibroid or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So I had, for instance, I had somebody come into my office today, and they've got high blood pressure, right? So I'm putting them on the nitric oxide, which is the arginine, citrulline, and with some D3, it increases nitric oxide and stuff like that, which increases pliability of the blood vessels, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking, okay, we need to get this person on some fibrinolytic enzymes. Now, so what that's going to do is, first of all, is it going to quote thin the blood, or is it?
I get that question a lot. So nattokinase is very commonly referred to as a blood thinner.
Mm,
I would never call any enzyme, certainly not nattokinase, a true blue therapeutic blood thinner.
okay.
There is some viscosity improvement that takes place in the blood just from the act of cleansing the blood. When you get that bile and junk and excess fibrin and all that stuff out of the blood, you're certainly going to improve the condition of it, the way it's going to flow. And so there is some improvement in viscosity, yes, but I would not call it a mechanical blood thinner like a Coumadin or a warfarin or something like that.
Got it. So can you actually take these? Okay, so let's keep going down that road because it's interesting to me. Someone has high blood pressure. Do you think it might affect the blood pressure, or might it affect the actual plaquing around the arteries? Do we have any research on that? Is there anything?
Okay, plaque. Those are two different questions.
Give
So,
me, Mike. Come
okay,
on.
so with plaque, it can go. Systemic enzymes can go after plaque. Proteolytic enzymes can go after plaque
Mm-hmm.
as long as it's not calcified. If it's calcified, it's really not going to do very much to it.
Okay.
If it is not calcified, then it can actually work its way, work at it as far as breaking it down to an extent. And as far as blood pressure goes, absolutely any decent systemic enzyme formula is going to be. Systemic enzymes in general are blood pressure modulators.
Mm.
And enzymes never do anything arbitrarily. In fact, enzymes know nothing. It's really your body that dictates what they do,
Oh,
where they're going to go,
here's
and what they're going
supply.
to do when they get there.
Send over there.
Yeah. So enzymes are blood pressure modulators. So if your blood pressure is high, it will lower it. If your blood pressure is low, it will raise it.
Fascinating. I had no idea. Okay. Do you know how that happens? How does it, or do we just see that now?
Actually, the mechanism for what causes that, I would love to have to. I'm going to have to say I got to visit back with you on that one, because there's a lot to it, and don't get me wrong, it's not rocket science, but I also don't want to say something that
I love
isn't.
it. I love it. A lot of pathways, but yes,
I'm not going to shoot from the hip. I'm not going to shoot from the hip on you.
I'm with you on that, and I don't want anybody to. So, okay, so we do have some help with blood pressure there. Because I'm now. What about if somebody is on like a warfarin or something like this? Are enzymes going to interfere with that?
No. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I will always caution someone if someone is taking the real high end blood thinners like the Coumadin, warfarin, that type of stuff, Plavix, maybe if they're taking real high doses. I will always suggest speak with your primary care physician,
Right.
you know, before incorporating any supplement, frankly, into your regimen. Most of the practitioners that I've worked with over the years, the vast majority have no issue. They don't even take pause
Right.
in adding systemic enzymes to the regimen of someone who is on a blood thinner.
Mm-hmm.
But I have maybe 2 or 3 times spoken with someone who did want to talk to their practitioner, and honestly, in a lot of cases, it really depends on the training that practitioner has.
Right.
Because there's some practitioners, they couldn't even tell you what serrapeptase is.
Right.
But there's plenty that do.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on the doctor, really. But the vast majority have no issue with it.
I have no problem with it. Okay. So now you said that if the plaquing has calcium in it, right, then it's not going to help break it down.
Not necessarily calcified. If it's that hardened plaque, that's like, I mean, it's like a petrified rock versus a pile of fine sand, that type of thing.
Right. So let's go through some of the conditions that this might help, right? That the systemic enzymes might help. So like if someone has, let's say they have plaquing in their brain, let's say they have dementia, Alzheimer's, that kind of thing, right? And they're taking, a bunch of systemic enzymes, like double what would normally be recommended, right? You're really loading the system. And to tell everybody, you have to take these things on an empty stomach, because if you take them with food, they might end up just digesting the food or getting mixed up in the food. And
not even might. That's all they're going to do.
That's all they're going to do.
What ends up happening is the acid levels in the stomach build up to a point where the caps will prematurely release the enzymes in the stomach, not in the intestine, or small intestine, I should say. And so yes, if they release in the stomach, all you're taking is a very, very fancy digestive enzyme.
Okay. All right. So let's say I had something like that, and someone had some dementia, and if this is off the reservation of sort of like, okay, there's no research on this, I have no idea, then let me know. But to me, it's interesting. If someone has something like that, plaquing in the brain, we're all concerned about stuff like that, right? Alzheimer's, thinking problems are on the rise, and conceivably, if someone did that for 2 years, let's say, what's going to happen in their body? As far as just the average person, like, somebody over 50, 60, whatever, starts taking enzymes on a high dose, what's going to happen? What's going on in their vascular system? Are they going to see less plaquing up here?
So there is, as far as plaquing on the brain, there actually quite possibly could be zero research on that. If there is any, it's very, very little.
Okay.
And probably not by a source that's going to be readily publishing it. So I have not seen anything on plaquing in the brain.
Okay.
I've never come across that. In fact, I've never heard of any study that even references it.
Okay.
So that would be tough for me to say.
Okay.
Lots of big changes would happen. Like you just asked, what would happen to the body?
Let's hear changes.
All kinds of stuff would happen to the body. I mean, they would have very little inflammation. They would have very little chronic pain. They would probably sleep better. They would probably have substantially better circulation, an extraordinarily on point immune system. Because enzymes are blood pressure modulators. They are also immune system modulators. So like I have a practitioner that I've worked with for years. She only works with autoimmune conditions. And I mean, systemic enzymes are part of her protocol in every instance.
It seems like it would be amazing because if you're cleaning up the blood, then the immune system doesn't have as much of a job to do, right? It's not
Correct.
it can calm down, right? Autoimmunes
Mhm.
are hyperactive immune system. It's working too much. It's out of control. We need to
Right.
pull it down so it stops attacking itself, and we clean the blood up, and it does a great job at that. Now, what about like histological changes, like anything that because obviously you said the uterine fibroids, right? That is
Mhm.
a clear material change in somebody's body. That is radical, right? That's
Yes.
wonderful. So I think what we're getting now is we're getting like a circulatory change. And based on that
Mhm.
circulatory change, we're getting less inflammation. We're getting less of a crazy response from the immune system. But I want to know, is there any histologic, you know what I mean? Like let's say I've got I had pneumonia, right? And I'm recently had pneumonia. I didn't, but I mean, let's say I did, right?
Mhm.
And now my body, because of all that inflammation, is going to lay down scar tissue in my
Mhm.
lungs, right? So or let's say I'm a chronic smoker, right? And if I'm taking those systemic enzymes, do you think there's a less chance that I'm going to be laying down excessive scar tissue in my lungs?
Less. It's certainly going. If there is any that's going to form, it will be minimized and minimized rapidly,
Mm,
especially especially after you're taking it ongoing for a long period of time.
right,
Anything, it would take a little bit to go after what already existed, but it would be kind of nipping it in the bud, if you will, as far as anything that was new that was
right,
about to form.
right. Or something even
It's also
that's
anti-mucosal too. I should also mention that. So enzymes are anti-mucosal. So you're not only going to be like any like phlegm or anything like that, that's going to be reduced dramatically, as well as this any associated scar tissue.
oh, that's fascinating. Um, so what about any research? Any like when you're quoting research with people and stuff like that? What do you like? What do you love? What's interesting?
Um, the inflammation factor, the pain and inflammation factor, that's
Mm,
one of my favorites. And fibrosis, scar tissue, endometriosis, fibrocystic breasts, fibroids, those are all. Um, I would say those are my favorites,
yes.
if you will, just because there's a lot of results that come from systemic enzymes, um, in on a whole array of different things. The reason why those would be my favorites is because I would say those are the most pronounced, where you are really, really watching somebody's life change in a lot
Mm,
of cases.
mm,
Um, and when I have a conversation with a woman who's telling me that she's on the cusp of a hysterectomy, and then I talk to her, 6 or 12 months later, she's like, "Oh, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm all good to go, and I
uh,
only have I had 7, but now I only have 2 left, and they're so small, they're not even a concern anymore. We're just going to keep staying the course, and they're going to go away too. And I'm thrilled, and thank you." Those are the conversations I love having.
oh yeah.
When someone tells me that they're so much more mobile, because they I mean, fibromyalgia is crippling for so many people.
Mm,
Um, and you're talking about, I mean, that's with fibromyalgia, you're really talking about kind of the greatest hits for a systemic enzyme, because you're talking about systemic inflammation combined with systemic fibrosis.
mm.
I mean,
It's exactly your wheelhouse.
it is totally in the wheelhouse for
Right, right.
systemic enzymes. Um, so that's a big one. I mean,
Mm,
and like I said, the chronic pain thing, because I mean, you're not going to have pain without inflammation. They go hand in hand.
mm-hmm,
And if you reduce one, you're going to reduce the other. And so much out there goes after pain, yes, but it goes after pain from the top down.
mm-hmm.
With systemic enzymes, and I'm going to try to avoid getting all complicated as far as terminology, but
Oh, go with the complicated terminology, please.
well, there's these little tiny protein chains in the body. And this is where he's like, when you're talking to a consumer, they start dozing off and falling asleep as
No,
you
no,
start talking.
geek out on it, Mike. Go.
But these little protein chains called circulatory immune complexes,
Hmm.
they dictate our entire inflammatory process. And when we have this huge supply of enzymes when we're young, pain didn't hurt. We weren't held down by pain too long, because the enzymes that we had would kick in a gear, break down those excess protein chains that were building and replicating and becoming more and more active.
Hmm.
They'd get broken down right away, and the pain would subside because the inflammation was gone.
Hmm. Right.
Well, when you're taking systemic enzymes, they're going to be at the ready to break down those same protein chains in the exact same manner. And when that happens, the inflammation comes down. When the inflammation comes down, the pain comes down, and it really speeds up recovery for a whole lot of people. Tons of athletes use systemic enzymes just for that trauma that just happened right now.
Right.
But it also works for the long-term stuff, rheumatoid arthritis, and a lot of people are bone on bone and just having a hard time getting around. And
true.
And systemic, I mean, there's so many things that systemic enzymes are capable of. It's really, I'm probably the only geek in the world that's truly this fascinated about talking about systemic enzymes.
I love it. I love it. No, I got 5-year-old twin girls, and I went skiing last weekend, and then we come home, we got to go rollerblading, and I mean, they're falling, and I'm hoping I don't fall. But yeah, I think I need to take some systemic enzymes because I'm sure the falls will come. But they fall and they just get right back up and cry a little bit. I'm good, Daddy. Okay, we're good. Yeah.
And that's what's actually one thing that's really, really cool. If you don't have a chronic condition, if you don't have a fibrosis condition, if you don't have scar tissue or an immune condition or whatever, if you don't have any of those things, that's fine. So if you're supplementing with a systemic enzyme at even a very low dose, you just keep your supply up, maybe just call it keeping it on point or keeping it at the ready. And then you do have that situation where, like, I do a lot of mountain biking and I really, really stink at it. I am that guy that's falling over my handlebars on a pretty regular basis.
I've done it myself. Yes.
Yeah. And like when I just take, I take 1 or 2 capsules twice a day, kind of whatever lands in my hand, really. But 1 or 2 capsules twice a day is all I really ever take. And if I do miss a dose, I'm not getting my heart broken over it.
Right.
But I don't have any chronic conditions. But if I do go out riding, I do take that spill, I'm not going to take 1 or 2. My next 6, 8, 10, 12 doses are probably going to be 3 or maybe even 4 capsules twice a day. But very rarely does anything settle in on me. I'm no matter how bad my spill is, it's not going to hold me down for much more than a day or 2.
Oh, that's incredible.
I come right back out of it.
That's incredible. I love it. So with the uterine fibroids, right? This is, and these things, these big chunks of fibrin, right? So they haven't, what you said, calcified at this point, right?
Fibroids are very rarely calcified.
Okay.
They can, but it isn't often.
Once they get in that calcified state, it's off the table.
Pretty much.
Or
very, very, very slow going.
Very slow going. So, but let's say someone has a calcification in a tendon, okay? Let's say a biceps tendon or whatever, and they take double dose for 2 years. Are we going to see something there?
Again, you can.
You can.
It's gonna really vary person to person.
Right.
Mass to mass. There's going to be some variables in there. It'd be a real long term, and it would have to be meticulous dosing. It'd be tough for me to say that it'll be gone in 2 years. No, it'll be reduced by 50% in 2 years. That would be impossible for me to say.
Right. And even the guy that has some scar tissue in his lungs because he was a smoker, or because he had Alzheimer's, because he had pneumonia or something like that. Even that person, you may be able to say, okay, it's going to help him immensely, but because
there are some products out there that do stand by their product and guarantee an end result. There are plenty of products out there that don't, but there are some that do. And so that would be, it depends on really the formula that you're choosing.
Right.
If they do stand behind it, that would be one avenue that you could take. But I don't ever want to give somebody false hope. But at the same time, like if it's somebody like if you have adhesions from a surgery,
right?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, yes, that if you stick to this dosing, they are going to go away. They are going to be reduced by at least 3/4 or better.
Right.
And if you start taking a lower dose, just a very low maintenance dose after you get to that point, they're still going to eventually go away.
That's
The
great.
excess will always go away. In fact, that's really how enzymes work in the body. Is they target proteins that don't belong. Your body will tag a protein in, it's either an exogenous protein where it doesn't belong there, it's unnecessary, it's redundant, maybe even harmful, or it's an endogenous protein, meaning it does belong there, it is necessary. And your body will only
go after the
send out the enzymes to go after and break down the proteins that have been tagged as exogenous, the ones that don't belong. And so that's why
Amazing.
That's why it'll eat up a fibroid, but it's certainly not going to eat up the uterus that fibroid is in.
Right. Let's hope
I
not.
mean, they're both made up of a protein-based matter. It's just one belongs and one does not.
Oh, interesting.
And the same goes with scar tissue. Like you cut your arm open, and immediately after that wound occurs, our healing factors start kicking into high gear, repair mechanisms, and little fibrous tissue is going to start to build and form and build up, heal that wound, and eventually form the scar that you see.
Right.
Now you can take all the enzymes in the world and it'll eat up all the excess scar tissue that's on the outside, and it'll definitely eat up any adhesions or internal scar tissue that's formed underneath. But it will never eat up so much that it reopens that wound.
Right.
And that's because your body has specifically tagged those cells as necessary to keep that wound healed.
Fascinating.
So there's kind of a built-in shutoff mechanism.
You know what, I was talking to Dr. Don Klum. We had another conversation on a podcast, and he's really a master of fasting and the diet and this, that, and the other. And he says we're staying in a fed state too much. So we're eating on average 17 to 23 times a day. So our insulin levels are up. And so we're not dipping down into the repair state. And so what happens, that's one of the reasons why we're laying down extra scar tissue, is we're eating way too often. We're eating way too much. We're not giving our bodies a break. And even fasting can help. I don't know if it releases enzymes or whatnot, but can help break down scar tissue also. And so you wonder, it's like, why are we laying down all this scar tissue, right? Why is this excess happening? I know the body walls it off, whether it's an infection, that's understandable. It walls it off just so that it doesn't get into the rest of the body, which makes sense. But the body has difficulty deciphering inflammation from an infection versus inflammation from mechanical stress, or some type of injury,
injury, whatever.
Yeah, trauma. And so it ends up walling that off excessively also. And then I think if we're not going into that repair state, even sleep is a repair state, decreased eating is a repair state, we end up putting down too much scar tissue. And then something like a systemic enzyme to supplement is amazing, because it's going to help, like you said, trim the excess.
Yeah.
Now, what about, are certain enzymes? It sounds like the nattokinase is a go-to, right? It's just phenomenal.
Nattokinase, I mean, if I had to list my faves, it'd be nattokinase, ceapros, trypsin, chymotrypsin, serrapeptase. I like SOD a lot, superoxide dismutase. I'm a fan of that one also.
That's an enzyme. It's an enzyme.
It is an enzyme, yes.
Oh, it ends in ace. That's right. Anything that ends in ace. Sorry. I thought it was right. Okay. So an antioxidant. I think it's an antioxidant.
It is an antioxidant also. A really, really great one, actually. But yes, it is also an enzyme.
Okay. So anyway, I want to start I've been taking them. I'm excited about it. I've got my people, that especially my people that are the autoimmune people, and then also the people that want to get rid of the extra fibrin, people with high blood pressure, people that need more, just getting junk out of their blood. I'm thrilled to have it. Now, I wanted to tell everybody, the one I use, I was using some other, and then I don't know, this one, I think it was just the name and the color made me use it, and it's called Fibrenza. And I actually reached out to you because I thought, okay, I want to learn. Give me more, Mike. And so that's what I use. Now, this formulation was made mostly for fibrin, but there's a lot in there. It's an enzyme complex, so to speak.
It is, and this kind of goes back to what we touched on very early on in the conversation. Is enzymes are very synergistic. There's a lot of really awesome enzymes out there that are capable of a whole lot of different things, but they're capable of so much more when they're working in concert with other enzymes. And it's funny you mentioned the Fibrenza, because Fibrenza specifically, it is a very complete formula. There's two real camps out there. There's your plant-based enzyme camp, and then there's your animal-based enzyme camp. And there's certainly merit to both. I mean, trypsin and chymotrypsin, those are animal-derived enzymes. They're very strong enzymes, and they work really well for a whole lot of people.
And they get that's a bovine source or something like that.
But there's bovine or porcine. Ours are bovine.
Okay.
The HCP formula, the Fibrenza, that is. That is a bovine source. But then you have serrapeptase. Well, actually, I should be more specific, because serrapeptase, yes, years and years and years and years and years ago, serrapeptase actually was derived from the secretion of the silkworm.
Okay. I think
nobody's harvesting silkworms to make their products anymore.
Right.
So
right. Lumbrokinase is the earthworm, I think. Okay.
That is correct.
Got it.
And so a lot of those enzymes, the plant-based enzymes like serrapeptase or ceoprose, those are going to be cultured. And then there's bromelain, which is from the pineapple, papain, which comes from the papaya. So there's different sources that make them all. But to get back on point, animal-based enzymes work really well. They do. Plant-based enzymes, there's plenty that are really, really potent. Like serrapeptase is a very potent enzyme. Ceoprose is a very, very potent enzyme. But I have so many practitioners that I've worked with over the years, they'll recommend one type or the other to this person or that person. And some people respond amazingly well, but some people don't respond at all. And the reason why is because we're all different metabolisms, different blood types, different pH ranges. All of those things are going to have a huge impact on how well a person is going to assimilate and utilize a plant-based enzyme over an animal-based one, and vice versa. And that, I think, is really where Fibrenza shines, because Fibrenza is the only systemic enzyme that's taken the most potent enzymes from both sources and combined them. So there's something for every metabolism, every blood type, every pH range to respond to. Makes it far more reliable. And when you're talking about enzymes, especially at the level of serrapeptase and even ceoprose especially, they're so potent, you don't have to take handfuls of them like you did years and years ago. I mean, there's some really great formulas out there, but you had to take handfuls at a time, and you had to do it 3 times a day. And there's a lot of people that don't want 20 or 30 pieces of chocolate in a day, let alone pills.
Right. And you have to get empty for it too. You're eating it, you're doing it like 2 hours after food and a half hour before food or something like that. So it's
either or, but yeah, half hour, 45 minutes before a meal or 2 hours after is typical with more of your decent formulas nowadays. You can get away with about half hour, 45 minutes before or 2 hours after.
Right. I do it. I wake up, I do my like 24 to 32 ounces of water and just do a couple and just get it in my system. And then I start my smoothie about, 40 minutes after that.
Yeah. I before my rear end leaves the bed, I do take my first dose, and then I do my shower and get dressed and all that happy stuff. And then it's been a good half hour, 45 minutes before I make my way to the coffee pot. So
right. Then we get a little energy going. Then we get a little energy going with the coffee.
Yeah.
So what about, have you had anybody in your life that you've said, okay, somebody calls you a buddy, a cousin or something like that, and they're like, hey, help me out, Mike. So-and-so has a problem, where you just were able to hit a home run for someone?
Yeah. Well, several, but you touched on it earlier, and it reminded me exactly of my mother's situation. My mother, this is going back 26 years ago, maybe a hair more. She had her gallbladder taken out, and it was done in the old school way. It wasn't just a little 1-inch incision. It was probably a good 5-6 inch incision just off center of her abdomen. And she had her gallbladder taken out, and sure enough, it was like 6, 7, 8 months later, she started feeling this horrible pain, this pulling sensation when she just twisted this way or twisted that way. And it was adhesions that had stranded out, and they started wrapping around her intestine. And so she had to go in for surgery, get the adhesions cut away. And the total irony there is another surgery is just going to mean more scar tissue.
Right.
And so sure enough, almost like clockwork, like 6, 7, 8, 9 months.
Yeah.
For years, she was going in to get another surgery. Then
Oh my
another
God.
surgery,
Same
another
story.
surgery. And finally, I started learning more about enzymes, among a few other things, but enzymes. And I said, you know what? You're going to take this. You need to take this, and you just got to stick to it. Don't miss a dose. And the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to go get the same surgery you're going to go get again anyway.
Right.
It's the worst thing that's going to happen.
Right. Not bad.
And sure enough, she stuck to it and stuck to it and stuck to it. And that pulling sensation that she was commonly experiencing at like clockwork started going away.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then it did go away. And then it was a year and a half, almost 2 years that went by, and she didn't have that next surgery.
Oh my God.
And so she was so fascinated with how well it worked for that she decided she was going to stay on it at a higher dose and see what it did to her external scar tissue. Because it was the old school way. It was a big, thick, ropey, discolored scar going up her abdomen.
Mm-hmm.
And so she stayed at the higher dose for a longer period of time than probably needed to. But now to this day, I mean, don't get me wrong, if she were to lift up her shirt, it's clear as day she's had a surgery.
Right.
But instead of that ropey protrusion that was all discolored, now it's the normal skin tone, totally flush to her skin. Night and day difference on the external and on the internal. And now at this point, it's been 19, 20 years.
Oh, fascinating.
Since she's had a surgery.
And no pulling.
And she had them back to back for years. And hasn't had one now in 20. So
wow, I love it. Isn't it great to help mom? I've had
it's great to help mom.
Yeah, no doubt. So what about anything negative? Anything where like somebody took it, you're like, nope, you're taking too much. Let's pull it down a bit, or something like that.
Well, there's no toxicity to enzymes. Systemic enzymes, there really is no toxicity to them at all. Your body will use all the enzymes you give it. Mm-hmm. And it's not like vitamin C. Like vitamin C, you can go take 30,000 milligrams of it. Your body will use 2,000 or 3,000. The rest kind of goes to waste. Your body not only will use all the enzymes that you give it, but it has the ability to store enzymes. So they aren't going to go to waste.
Wow. Great.
And there are some formulas that are going to have higher dosing than others. So it really depends on the product that you're looking at. Some products are going to tell you, I mean, the bottle probably won't say so, but testimonials will tell you, maybe the brochure will have, or the label will say something like, for a chronic condition, you might want to consider upping your dose to XYZ.
Right.
So some products you're going to take 5 or 7, or maybe even more than that, 2 or possibly 3 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
But there are products out there too that have such a high potency, have such a delivery system,
right,
that you only have to take 2 or maybe 3 twice a day. And so it really depends on the products to how much you're actually taking.
Right.
Because the higher the dosing, and this is just my own personal opinion,
tell me,
tends to be with products that have less of a delivery system, something that's a tablet based versus a capsule, something that's enteric-coated versus not. Or I shouldn't say not, because every systemic enzyme needs some type of protective barrier of some sort. It's just a question with enteric coatings. Yes, they work. Yes, they will get the capsule or tablet to the intestine, but then it's going to continue traveling through the intestine, where eventually that coating breaks down. Eventually the capsule or tablet breaks down. Eventually the enzymes release. And you've already long passed the optimal place where you're going to get the highest absorption of those. So delivery system does matter, and impacts your dosing dramatically. So does the potency, of course, but delivery system plays a huge role in that.
So as far as negative things, you're not finding much as far as any side effects like that? I
mean, at worst, the biggest thing that I ever hear, and it's not frequently at all. In fact, we used to track it. It was like 1 out of 12, 1 out of 14 people would go through because when you first start on a systemic enzyme, the very first thing the enzymes do before going after fibrosis or inflammation or any of that, very first thing they do is they clean house. A lot of the toxins and garbage and bile that's built up in your liver, your kidneys, your blood, that's going to get gathered up pretty quickly and kind of ejected out of the body through the fastest method possible. Usually it's through elimination, sometimes perspiration, but most cases it's elimination. But because of that cleansing that's taking place, some people will they'll call it like a detox reaction or something like
First
that.
reaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And when that does present, like I said, it's few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
1 out of 12, 1 out of 14 people. And when it presents, it's mild to possibly moderate flu-like symptoms.
Okay.
Upping your water intake will certainly shorten that up
Mm-hmm.
and make it more mild also,
Mm-hmm.
should that occur. But
Mm-hmm.
for most people, it's really a non-issue. But that's really the only negative that I've ever come across.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not a negative. It's actually a good thing. But
it's a good thing. You just have to punch
Yeah.
through it. Yeah. I do it when I do a 72-hour fasting protocol with people. And I say, okay, you've got 5 organs of elimination. You've got your kidney, your liver, your skin, your colon, and your lungs. And so I'll have all these things being detoxified so that they can handle the 72-hour fast, right? The dry brushing for the skin, sweating, breathing exercises, charcoal for the digestive system. And then I have them take the systemic enzymes, which is going to hopefully, I think, decrease stress on the liver, right?
Yeah. Liver, blood, and kidneys is the very first thing that it goes after.
Oh, great. Okay, so it's detoxifying the liver. Beautiful. Gosh, I'm thrilled. I appreciate this conversation. It's helping me out, and I hope it helps other people out. To let you guys all know, Mike works with HCP Formulations or HCP Formulas. They have
HCP Formulas,
yeah, and they have Fibrenza, which is the enzyme complex that he talked about. One is pollinating the other. There's a synergistic effect. And we got a lot of information. We got a lot of knowledge here. I really appreciate you being with us today. And thank you, Mike.
No, it's totally my pleasure. This is
right on.
I love doing this. I've been doing it for, like I said, almost 20 years. So yeah, I do have a passion for it.
No, I know you like to help people. So do I. Well, thank you so much for being with us today with Health and Care. Check out our other podcasts. Like us. You can find us on iTunes, on Spotify, and of course on YouTube. Thanks so much for being with us today.